September 5th promises to be a very crucial day in the history of the United States and possibly the history of the world. As we know, the Republican Party and Trump don't play by any rules, and they are determined to stay in power no matter what happens, and no matter who does what. As circumstances would have it, there are two important mobilizations that are called for on September 5th, and they should not conflict. It's up to the left to make sure that they do not conflict. The Not Fucking Around Coalition, a black nationalist group that is armed, it's a black nationalist militia, and they are going to Louisville to get justice for Breonna Taylor, who's been dead for over 155 days, killed by the Louisville police in a no-knock raid. Breonna Taylor was a medical technician, a very hard-working woman. She was murdered in her bed in a senseless and unconstitutional and illegal no-knock raid by cops who did not announce who they were or why they were there, and they were in the wrong apartment, and they murdered her. And there has been no justice. The Not Fucking Around Coalition promises to be in Louisville if justice has not been served before September 5th, and it's possible that they will have to go there, and they won't back down, and they should not back down. But the left has to state without equivocation that we support this action by the No Fucking Around Coalition, and we don't have to agree with everything that their leader says. We don't have to agree with their ideas. We don't have to agree with their theology. We don't have to agree with anything that any of them ever said, or in other words, they don't have to be perfect, and their leaders don't have to be purely Marxist or Marxist at all. The No Fucking Around Coalition has taken on this fight. It's a very important fight, and you don't have to love Grandmaster Jay to agree that this is a very important fight, and that we must make it very clear that we support them, and that if there's anything that we can do to help them, that's what we will do. In July of 2019, the people of Puerto Rico got into the streets, and for days and days and days they demonstrated, they protested, and they drove out a corrupt right-wing governor from his job. They forced him out on the streets. They could not wait for another election. They are an example to us. They are an example to the left.
Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rossello has announced his resignation after days of mass protests.
There are still people in the streets. Maybe it's too dark to see them, but you can certainly hear them playing music. Some of them are already on their way home because it have been very exhausting days indeed. Since yesterday, there were rumors that the governor is going to step down, so people were together waiting for his announcement in front of his mansion, but nothing happened. Only tonight, very late, he finally announced that he would step down, that he would remain in office until the 2nd of August to make sure that there will be an orderly transition. And when people here watched it and learned that he is really going to step down, they began to celebrate, to dance in the street, to drive their cars throughout the city. That it is important for him to stay in office, to stay in power, because what he has achieved for the island, but it became clear that he didn't have any other choice than to step down after internal telegram messages were leaked, text messages in which the governor made misogynic and homophobic comments. He mocked victims of Hurricane Maria. He made jokes about shooting San Juan's mayor, and basically all of that, people felt that it was so disgusting that they started to protest, and as the protest continued, so grew the pressure on the governor to step down.
Hi, you guys. I'm Jodie Sweetin, and I want to read something to you from Refuse Fascism that I think is incredibly important right now. As Trump threatens the elections and sends fascist stormtroopers into cities, build for united nationwide mass protests on Saturday, September 5th to demand Trump-Pence out now. We are speeding towards an election that Trump is already contesting and now threatens to delay. This election, if there is an election, will be a showdown over the form of rule in this country. Will the Trump-Pence regime hold on to power and be given a mandate to violently suppress dissent and criminalize protest? Will the regime that brands as their enemy all those who struggle for a better world, whether for Black lives or the environment or immigrants' rights, be unleashed to exact revenge aimed at destroying our ability to stand up again? This and worse is unfolding right now, and it has a name: fascism. Now is the time to marshal the people for a determined struggle to demand the Trump-Pence regime out now. All who have been demonized and criminalized by this regime, and the millions who hate Trump and what he stands for, must unite with an unwavering resolve to remove this regime from power the soonest possible time. A fierce battle for our future is underway. The energy that millions of people from many different nationalities, backgrounds, and political beliefs brought to the streets across this country after the horrific murder of George Floyd, and the determination that thousands brought to the streets of Portland to stand strong against Trump's stormtroopers, can and must become the force to remove this hateful regime from power. For more than 3 years, people have relied on the normal channels to stop this regime, only to watch them turn into dead ends. But the months of Black Lives Matter protests show how dread can be transformed into hope. Our power is sustained, mass, nonviolent protest in the streets. Our strength is our diversity. Our demand is for justice. These are the ingredients that have driven out hated regimes and corrupt leaders around the world, from South Korea in 2017, to Armenia in 2018, and to Puerto Rico in 2019. Using voter suppression and gerrymandering, unfounded accusations of voter fraud, mainly by immigrants and Black people, attacks on mail-in ballots, which are completely legal, and a plan to recruit ex-military and police as poll watchers to challenge voters that they deem suspicious. The Trump-Pence regime has shown its determination to maintain a stranglehold on power through legal and extra-legal means. Even talk of canceling or indefinitely postponing the elections is not outside the realm of possibility, as we have seen. Relying on the upcoming elections without a mass struggle now to demand the removal of the regime is a mistake with catastrophic consequences for people in this country and around the world. We cannot wait for the Trump-Pence regime to further delegitimize and degrade the elections. Just as the German people could not have stopped their genocidal fascist program without driving out Hitler and the Nazi regime, we must act with all our resolve to drive this regime out of power. Allowing this 21st century fascist regime, led by a demented bully with his finger on the nuclear trigger, to consolidate its rule in the most powerful country in the world is to foreclose on a future for humanity and the planet. There is no painless resolution to this deepening crisis. In the words of the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And to stop a vicious American fascism that threatens the very future of our humanity, the necessary and unifying demand for every struggle for justice to advance is that Trump-Pence out now. This regime has already gone after the most vulnerable while continually expanding the groups of people in its crosshairs. Even if you survive that, what will you be forced to accept in the process? Who will you become as you accept the unacceptable? We have everything to lose if we wait, but everything to gain if we act now to bring millions into the streets, refusing to accept a fascist America. There are two futures before us. Which one we get is up to us. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.